On the evening of November 1st, 1893, Damian Gruev, a student, was walking with a friend on the Salonika quayside when they bumped into an acquaintance, a young schoolteacher named Ivan Hadji Nikolov. The three men argued at length about the fate of Macedonia and the need to rid the province of Ottoman rule. They finished the evening by forming a revolutionary committee. Not unreasonably, they felt that three men represented too narrow a base for such a task. So a few days later, they drafted another three friends into the Macedonian Central Revolutionary Committee. Its members designed a seal depicting a gun and dagger crossed under a bomb. Enclosing the three symbols were the words Svoboda ili smrt, freedom or death. By the time all 16 members held the founding Congress a year later, in August 1894, in the interior city of Resen, they had not yet managed to shoot, stab, or blow up anybody. This would soon change. The 2 decades of violent chaos in Macedonia that followed the founding of this group, which after several name changes settled in 1905 on the internal Macedonian Revolutionary Organization, formed the single most complicated period in modern Balkan history. Hello and welcome to Samuel's Fortress. I'm your host Kirill, and today we will be discussing the internal Macedonian Revolutionary Organization. Now, if you recall from the previous video, at the end of the Russo-Turkish War of 1877 to 1878, the Russian victory resulted in the signing of a Treaty of San Stefano. Now, that Treaty of San Stefano granted the Bulgarians their historical regions of Macedonia, Thrace, Mysia, and portions of Dobruja. However, the great European powers did not want the formation of this large Bulgarian state, which was backed by the Russian Empire. So therefore, the European powers forced Russia to sit down at the Congress of Berlin and renegotiate this Treaty of San Stefano. And this revised treaty, the Treaty of Berlin, would be drafted, which greatly reduced the territories granted to Bulgaria. Now, for reference, here again is the map of the Treaty of San Stefano and the Treaty of Berlin. So the dotted lines, again, are the Treaty of San Stefano. The solid lines are the Treaty of Berlin. So as you can see here, Macedonia and portions of Thrace are returned to the Ottoman Empire. Now, as a result of this Treaty of Berlin, the Slavic population of Macedonia and Thrace begins to revolt against the Ottomans, attempting to liberate themselves from Ottoman rule. However, this is not successful due to the fact that these initial uprisings are very small, they're disorganized, the people are not very well armed, and they don't really go anywhere. So what is needed is an organized movement, a large-scale organization which will coordinate these uprisings, these rebellions, in a quote-unquote general uprising in order to liberate Macedonia and Thrace from the Ottomans. Now, as I read here from Misha Glenny's The Balkans, a man by the name of Damian Gruev, more commonly known as Dame Gruev, will form such an organization, an organization that will come to be known as the Internal Macedonian Revolutionary Organization, or IMRO for short. If I accidentally say VMRO instead of IMRO, that's just because VMRO is the Macedonian and Bulgarian version of IMRO, the way of saying it in Macedonian and Bulgarian. So this initial organization is formed, like I said, in 1893. Its first chairman will be a Dr. Hristo Tatarchev from the city of Resen. He is one of these original 6 members who formed the organization in Thessaloniki. Now, this organization is essentially a continuation, if you will, of the internal revolutionary organization of Vasil Levski from a few decades previously. So they're kind of picking up where Levski left off. Again, these types of revolutionary organizations meant to liberate the Bulgarians from the Ottomans. Now, what's important to know is that IMRO, or the Internal Macedonian Revolutionary Organization, is really kind of an umbrella term for multiple committees that exist, different revolutionary committees. Now, there's 2 main competing revolutionary committees that fall under the umbrella of IMRO. These are the, the Central Committee and the Supreme Committee. And we'll get into the difference between these committees in a little bit. But that's kind of the initial structure of IMRO. Now, Dame Gruev is essentially kind of the figurehead, the poster child, if you will, of this initial organization. He's kind of running the show in the early years. Now, another man by the name of Goce Delchev is also fomenting revolution for the same purpose. Now, Goce Delchev initially is working completely separately from Gruev in the initial organization. Delchev is not really aware of Gruev. These are secret organizations. It's not like they're publishing. A revolutionary organization was formed in Salonika in 1893 in the local newspapers. This is not a very well-known thing amongst the populace. These are secret organizations. So Delchev does not really find out about this organization early on. However, as he's spreading revolution himself independently of Gruev, the two individuals will meet eventually. Delchev and Gruev will encounter each other in the city of Štip in eastern Vardar, Macedonia, and they will agree to work together. They quite like each other. They become close friends, and along with a third friend, Pere Toshev, they will kind of form the core of this revolutionary activity. Essentially, Gruev, Delchev, and Toshev are the new generation Levski, Botev, and Karavelov. They kind of pick up again from this older internal revolutionary organization, and they kind of revive it under IMRO. So what does this organization look like? What is the structure of IMRO? Well, the structure is essentially based on these chetas, these guerrilla bands, these armed guerrilla bands. So a cheta, again, is the military unit, the formation, and it's made up of guerrilla fighters known as komiti. So again, a cheta formed from komiti, and this cheta is led by a chief, a commander known as a voivoda. And this voivoda and his cheta will control a district. There are districts created by the revolutionary organization called rayons, and these rayons will again be commanded by a voivoda who will command a cheta made up of komiti. And then the voivoda from each district, from each rayon, will form the committee itself, the central committee, and then the supreme committee. Now, this structure of IMRO is created by a man by the name of Hristo Matov. Hristo Matov was a very intelligent leader of the organization early on, and he is kind of the brains behind the formation of the organization, the logistics, the structure. He's kind of the one organizing, again, the structure of the organization. Now, as I mentioned, there are two committees that are competing within the overall umbrella of IMRO. This is the Central Committee and the Supreme Committee. Now, the Central Committee is made up of revolutionaries from the occupied territory of Macedonia itself. It's sometimes referred to as the internal organization. Their goal is to liberate Macedonia, and the Thracian regions from the Ottoman Empire, and ultimately to form an independent, autonomous Macedonian state. Now, the Supreme Committee is made up of Macedonian emigres living in Bulgaria, and these are essentially Macedonians who flee Ottoman occupation to operate more freely outside of this Ottoman rule in Bulgaria. They mostly go to Sofia, and that's where they kind of base their revolutionary activities out of. And the Supreme Committee is sometimes referred to as the external organization because it is external of Macedonia itself. Now, the goal of the Supreme Committee is not so much they also wish to liberate, obviously, Macedonia and Thrace from the Ottoman Empire. However, their goal is not necessarily to form an independent, autonomous Macedonian state. Their goal is to liberate the territories of Macedonia and Thrace so they can be incorporated into Bulgaria the same way that Eastern Rumelia was incorporated into Bulgaria. So they're trying to fulfill the promise given to the Bulgarians at the Treaty of San Stefano to create a large Bulgarian state containing all the Bulgarian territories where Bulgarians live, to be ruled over by the Bulgarian Tsar. So those are the two committees with their two separate ultimate goals. And aside from these kind of formal committees, you also have local militias. Basically, each village has a militia led by a village chieftain of each militia, and these will be kind of the irregulars of Imro. So you have the Chetas led by the voivodas, which are kind of the regulars, if you will. They are much more well-funded, well-organized, well-armed than the village militias, but they are working in concert. Now, I have here a book called The Tragic Peninsula by a professor, Chris Anastasov. Now, Chris Anastasov was a professor at Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri. Now, Chris Anastasov is originally from, I believe, the Kostur region of Aegean Macedonia. His father was actually one of these, the leaders of these village militias in the Kostur region. And this book is excellent. This is essentially a history of the internal Macedonian Revolutionary Organization from its founding to its dissolution in 1934, and this is probably the best English language history on the organization. Although this is highly recommended, you're probably not going to be able to find a copy of this. It's quite rare. There was only one edition of this book published in 1938. I managed to get a copy of this book as a gift from a friend of mine who is also a viewer of this channel. So thank you very much. You know who you are. But again, this is an excellent work by Chris Anastasov, and he manages to kind of discuss what it means to be a member of the organization. So there are essentially two types of members of IMRO. You have active and passive members. And Chris Anastasov here details what it means to be an active member, what it means to be a passive member. So quoting now, the membership consisted of two categories, the passive and the active. The former or passive member was any peaceful citizen who carried on his industrial pursuit but who assisted the movement in the following ways. He or she might take part in local elections, become a member of church boards of managers or district councils in order to keep alive the national consciousness by supporting the school system. He or she might carry out the work of agitation and propaganda by pleading the cause of Macedonia before sympathetic foreign statesmen, societies, newspapers, etc. He or she might contribute to the revolutionary treasury or put himself in a position to procure necessary war materials such as rifles, ammunition, revolvers, explosives, medical supplies, etc. The active members, on the other hand, were those who had openly declared themselves against the administration. They were always in the mountains, roaming from village to village and organizing chetas from among the peasants in order to guard the rights and assure the security of the subjugated population by means of arms. Thus, the active workers constituted the army of the invisible state. An active member, therefore, could be anyone who declared himself voluntarily ready to take up arms and join the revolutionary chetas. They were required to swear an oath of fidelity, loyalty, and obedience. After this, the active member ceased to belong to his family and belonged to the IMRO, blindly fulfilling the orders of the organization. On Bible, dagger, and revolver, the members of the IMRO swore to the following fealty, quote, "I swear on my faith, conscience, and honor that I will work for the liberty of Macedonia and the Adrianople Vilayet with all my strength and means, and that I will never betray the secret of the revolutionary work of the Imro. Should I do such a thing, may I be killed by this revolver or by this dagger, which I kiss. Amen." End quote. Such was the baptism of the active members of the great conspiracy that shook the throne of the Red Sultan of Turkey, Abdul Hamid. Now, you can see here, this is a Bible that is crossed with a revolver and a dagger. So basically the prospective member of IMRO would recite the oath, make the sign of the cross, and kiss the revolver and the dagger, and therefore be initiated within the organization. Now, the ultimate goal of this organization, like I said, is a general uprising. A general uprising to liberate Macedonia and the Adrianople Vilayet, Thrace, from the Ottomans. Now, it should be noted that the first attempt at a general uprising by the Supreme Committee in the fall of 1902, known as the Gorna Jumaya uprising, is a complete failure and a disaster. Basically, the Supreme Committee in the region of Pirin, Macedonia, around the town of Gorna Jumaya, hence it's known as the Gorna Jumaya uprising, they launch a rebellion, an armed insurrection against the Ottomans in this Pirin region. However, it is not at all successful. The Supreme Committee had failed to obtain support for this uprising from the Bulgarian government or from any foreign government in Europe, and therefore the Ottomans managed to quickly put down and crush this Gorna Jumaya rebellion in the fall of 1902. Now, the main blowback from this Gorna Jumaya uprising is that the Ottomans, once they put it down, they managed to uncover arms, ammunition, intelligence from the Supreme Committee. Many of the members of the committee are arrested, interrogated, and the Ottomans gained quite a bit of information about the internal Macedonian revolutionary organization. Now, what this does is it puts a large amount of pressure on the Central Committee to launch their own uprising. Basically, the Turks are gathering a lot of information about who the members of the committees are, where they're located, where the arms are located, and the Central Committee is essentially, like I said, placed under extreme pressure to launch an uprising of their own before they get discovered by the Ottoman officials. Now, the Central Committee is not at all prepared for this type of general uprising, but again, they're kind of under the gun and they must act before it's too late. So here again, Professor Anastasov has an excellent passage regarding this debate within the Central Committee about launching an uprising after this failed Gorna Jumaya uprising. So, quote, "The arguments of the opposition were strong and logical. They argue that the population of Macedonia was not ready for such drastic and perilous action, that the people were not sufficiently armed, and that some districts were completely devoid of armament or other preparations. They also declared that the people had no experience in the use of arms and had no opportunity to drill. The preparatory period had been too short, and much longer time was needed for a more or less complete training of the masses. Those of the leaders who concurred with the decision of the Salonika Congress, Garvanov, Matov, Dr. Tatarchev, and others, maintained that since the Turks had already uncovered and captured a considerable amount of armament, and since there was already an intensive campaign to search for arms, the result might be the complete destruction of the IMRO and its plans. 10 years of effort would be lost." So again here, Professor Anastasov details how even though the Central Committee is aware that it's not prepared for an uprising, they cannot wait to be discovered by the Ottomans, and a uprising must be launched nevertheless. So what occurs is, in January of 1903, the Central Committee will meet in the city of Salonika and hold a congress known as the Salonika Congress, at which time they reach the conclusion that a general uprising will be launched that year in 1903. In May of that year, 1903, a second congress is held in the village of Smilevo, And at that Congress, the logistics of the uprising are hashed out within the Central Committee. Now, tragically, that same month, May of 1903, Goce Dilchev, who by this time is the most famous, most popular, kind of the most well-recognized revolutionary, is killed. He dies in a skirmish with Ottoman troops in what is known as the Battle of Banitsa. Basically, Goce Dilchev is going around spreading. He's going around organizing people for this general uprising, and is found out and confronted by the Ottomans, and at that point he dies in that skirmish with them around the village of Banitsa. Now, at this point in time, after Goce Dilchev's death, Dame Gruev kind of returns to being the main figure in the organization, and he, along with Boris Sarafov and Anastas Lozanchev, will form what is called the General Staff of the Central Committee. Basically, these three individuals, Gruev, Sarafov, and Lozanchev, will be the kind of triumvirate of the organization. They will be the key decision makers when it comes to planning and executing the general uprising. Now, the General Staff agrees that the date of the uprising will be held secret up until a few days before the actual uprising is to be launched. They don't want to just announce the date of the uprising and circulate that date. Due to security reasons, they do not want the Ottomans to find out when the date of the uprising is, obviously. So they keep the date secret. However, on July 28th, 1903, the General Staff, led by Gruev, Sarafov, and Lozanchev, circulate a letter to the voivodas, to all the chetas, announcing the date of the insurrection. And that letter reads as follows, quote, "Brothers, finally, the much expected day of the altercation with our age-long enemy has arrived. The blood of our innocently perished brothers from the Turkish tyranny cries out for retribution. The honor of our mothers and sisters demands rehabilitation. Enough of so much torments, enough of so much ignominy. 1,000 times death is preferable to a shameful and beastly life. The specified date in which the people throughout Macedonia and the Adrianople province must rise openly with arms in their hands against the enemy is the 2nd of August, 1903. Brothers, follow your chiefs on that day, rally around the banner of liberty, and be obstinate in the struggle. Only in a stubborn and lengthy struggle lies our salvation. Let God bless our just cause and the day of the uprising. Down with Turkey, down with tyranny, death to the enemy. Long live the people, long live liberty. Ura." Now, as suggested here, the date of the uprising is August 2nd. August 2nd is Ilinden, or St. Elijah's Day. And on that date, the uprising is launched. Now, I'll quote here from Misha Glenny's The Balkans on what exactly occurred on that date. Misha Glenny writes, quote, "As twilight descended on the evening of Ilinden, haystacks were set ablaze in the villages near Monastir. Soon beacons were burning throughout western Macedonia, as far south as Kastoria and as far north as Debar. Priests began blessing the banners emblazoned with the slogans, 'Freedom or Death,' and 'Macedonia for the Macedonians,' as the chetas prepared to drive out the Turks from their villages. Throughout the region, hundreds of men began digging, uncovering the buried weapons which had lain hidden for months and years in anticipation of the event. In a series of strikes, guerrillas cut almost all telegraph lines in the vilayets. Bridges were blown up and roads blocked. The biggest disappointment was the failure to seal off the railway between Monastir and Salonika. In the biggest operation of the uprising, 300 guerrillas organized in 8 chetas. They launched an assault on Krushevo. Most of the guerrillas were Slavs, but at least one of the voivodas was a local Vlach. After several hours of intense fighting, they captured the barracks and set fire to it. the entire garrison was either killed or driven out of town, which became the largest settlement to come under rebel control. Khrushchev's revolutionary leadership proclaimed the town a republic and set up establishing a new government. So what Misha Glenny here is talking about is the formation of what is known as the Khrushchevo Republic. So what this is from August 2nd to August 12th, Imro manages to capture the city of Khrushchevo and hold it, setting up a provisional government. Now, eventually the Turks will respond and send thousands of Ottoman forces to recapture the city of Khrushchevo on August 12th. Most of the Imro fighters at that point will abandon the city and flee to safety. However, the Vlach Voivoda that Misha Glenny mentions here, Pitoguli, with his chita, heroically stage a defense of the city of Khrushchevo at what is known as the Battle of Michkin Kamen. Now, this will not be successful. Pitoguli and his chita will be overrun by the Ottomans, and Pitoguli himself will be killed, and the city of Khrushchevo will be retaken by the Ottomans. Now, there are numerous uprisings throughout Macedonia, although most of them occur around the Monastir or Bitola region due to the favorable geography of that area. But nevertheless, there are other uprisings that occur throughout Macedonia for a period of about 3 months from August 2nd to November 2nd. But ultimately, this uprising, as predicted, will not be successful, and the Ottomans will manage to put down the insurrection the same way they did, with the Gorna Jumaya uprising. Now, Chris Anastasov here has a good paragraph kind of wrapping up what occurred during this Ilinden uprising. Anastasov writes, quote, "From the time of the declaration of the insurrection, August 2nd, until its fall, November 2nd, there were 239 skirmishes, 994 insurgents, and 5,328 Turkish soldiers were killed. The total number of insurgents was about 27,000 against a Turkish army of 351,000. During the suppression of the insurrection, there were 200 Bulgarian villages ruined by Turkish vengeance, 12,000 houses burned, 5,000 women outraged, 4,700 inhabitants slain, and 71,000 without roofs. Such was the heroic climax of the Imro and its fall during the insurrection of 1903. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.